Well, I think the entire day has been culminating to this final panel today, where we'll try to share experience and first insights about the implementation of MiCAR. And we have, Sandra just mentioned, you don't have to ask your lawyer for everything, and it's great to have at least 3 lawyers on the panel today, and an expert from the European Commission, and a practitioner from a company that's actually trying to implement a money token in Germany and the European Commission. My name is Moritz Schildt. I remember that I had my first contact with Bitcoin back in 2013, and I felt that this is an interesting investment subject, and because I've been Geschäftsleiter of an Wertpapierinstitut for several years. I approached BaFin back in 2014, asking them if they have any expertise on setting up financial instruments that would invest in crypto assets. And at that point in time, the only person within BaFin being willing to talk to me was the people from money laundering, making it very, very clear that they said, okay, we are in the public administration, you can apply for everything you like, but if you do something related to crypto, we will definitely find reasons and ways to not to permit that. And it's with great pleasure now to talk about a situation where kind of everything has changed. I remember that there has been a BaFin event where they started providing certain guidance on how to approach these digital assets, and they started saying there is a WPA token, the WPA token, which stands for Wertpapier-ähnliche Token, and everybody was trying to say, okay, let's avoid that, let's try to remain beneath the radar of BaFin, and now we have a framework in Europe. And Carola mentioned it, and Eric Romba, whom I just met, just mentioned that he was in New York, and everybody is claiming that Europe is about 3 years ahead of the US because we have something in place that's called MiCAR, which might be a reliable framework for crypto assets in Germany and Europe. So with that, I would like to have my esteemed panelists, and I would like to welcome you and give you the opportunity to just briefly introduce yourself, tell us who you are and what the organization you're working for is doing. And I start with you, Joachim Schwerin, economist from the European Commission.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and again, great to be here again, and having listened also to the previous presentation, which I think that's tone very wisely. Joachim Schwerin, European Commission, DG Grow. I'm representing the real economy part of the blockchain and crypto world, but I've of course also been involved in the whole financial package in developing MiCAR, now also in the next steps related to that. My responsibility is developing the token space in Europe. I think MiCAR is an essential part of that, although a tiny part, and we'll come to the details in a second. Happy to be here.
Next in the row is Johannes, please.
Hi, I'm Johannes Wirtz. I'm a partner with the international law firm Bird&Bird. I'm working on crypto projects since 2014, when the first client came to us and asked, yeah, it's a great idea that BaFin regulates Bitcoin, and I want to have this stamp for my company being a regulated provider. After we advised him what it's mean to be regulated by the German regulator, they found other jurisdictions and stayed away from Germany. I think we have come a long way since then, have seen a lot of development in the space, a lot of growing up in the sector, and nowadays we are quite used to having a regulated and licensed crypto asset service provider, and MiCAR is, I think, for Germany just the next step.
Next in the row is Nick from Jones Day.
Yeah, hi, Nick Wittek from Jones Day. Part of the financial markets practice and also of the technology practice, looking into everything that has to do with digitization and tokens for roughly 7 years. And as part of that, basically bringing assets like securities, fund units, derivatives, on-chain as well as cash, and building platforms for exchanging tokens, trading tokens, but also, for example, for digital identities as well as corporate business models. And I think that comparing that with our colleagues in the US and Singapore, Europe is going ahead, but we also need to be careful that we don't over-regulate. And interesting to see how MiCAR will be fitting in with the BaFin approach that in 2013 made crypto assets a financial instrument.
Perfect. On the very right-hand side of our panel, Miroslav.
Miroslav Đurić, solicitor and attorney at Wessing, another international law firm. Within our fintech practice, where we are advising both incumbent financial institutions and fintech players, we are focusing on supporting them in the transformation of the financial services industry. And ever since the ICO bull run in 2018, we are pretty much supporting companies that are using blockchain technology and crypto assets, both in the securities trading space as well as in the cryptocurrency related areas.
Great, wonderful. And last but not least, above us all, Patrick, please give us a short introduction to you and to your company circle.
Yes, happy to, Moritz. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Patrick Hansen. I'm the Director for EU Policy and Strategy at Circle. Circle being primarily known for being the issuer of USDC and EuroC, so two fiat-backed and fiat-denominated stablecoins. It's a great pleasure to be here again, although this time I call in from Berlin. Hopefully next time I'll be back in Frankfurt. It's my fourth or fifth time at the Crypto Asset Conference, and the Philipp Sandner and the team always do a great job bringing all the relevant people together. So really looking forward to the conversation. And back to you, Moritz.
Yeah, thank you. Wonderful. We want to dig into the details. However, before we start doing that, I would like to take the opportunity that we have Joachim standing here, who is at the source of all of it, to not tell us what MiCAR is the content. We had this introduction with Sandra, but maybe to share with us what is the feedback you received so far, and are there any certain obstacles you have not overseen when creating MiCAR?
That's indeed, I would say, the pertinent question. I mean, there have been different phases. There has been the phase where we came up with the project that you all know. There was a lot of enthusiasm there. I hear that Europe is seen as being advanced of other parts of the world, be that as it may. What at least we have done, I think we've opened the door. Now, from my personal perspective, and I cannot speak for everyone else, of course, is the moment that you have finished such intense work in a very short time frame, and you see it on paper, and then it gets through the political process with all the recitals and changes and stuff like that, that probably create more confusion than they help, but that's the political process that you always have federal regulation. It's out. It's a very good achievement because indeed it puts us in a position where we discuss things, where now the litmus test will of course be what will get on the ground, who will walk through the door. But then of course the moment you see it, you realize how many question marks indeed there are. And that shouldn't come as a surprise, because this whole process of having a regulation, and we know that, is a little bit for the older among us like Radio Erevan. When always you ask the question, is it ready? The answer is yes, but. So basically we have the text out, but. Then come the delegated acts. Then come the standards that are now being proposed by EBA and ESMA. I'll come to that in a second. Then comes the question politically of actually who will go through that door. What we have at least achieved is that everyone takes it seriously and considers, perhaps from the bigger stablecoin operators, as a sort of hedging options if other parts of the world mess it up. Can we go to Europe? Can we also go to Europe or staying in other parts as well? Should we be able to do more than perhaps we've foreseen? So that's a good moment in time. But we also must, of course, face the situation that a lot of questions are out there. No one has yet, to any extent, walked through that door in the sense that it's operational. We've heard in the presentation before us, and that's, of course, applying from the first day of your studies. Do your homework on time. So indeed, it's like an exam. I mean, when you prepare, it takes longer than you expect. And of course, there is a process of 12 or 18 months, not by the lottery, but because it is meant to take 12 or 18 months in order to prepare and answer all the questions. So a lot of things need to be discussed. I see the biggest merit in this discussion as such, because the topic is on the table. Next year will be extremely crucial. We have the European elections of the European Parliament. We have the new policy cycle for 5 years, starting with the Commission. We have the US elections. We have a lot of other things happening in the world. So the next year will be very exciting, because at the end of the next year, we'll have a political agenda for the next 5 years. That we don't know yet, but at least we have a foot in the door on this discussion here. Now, of course, comes the fine-tuning. And the fine-tuning, and that's my last introductory remark, has two actually completely different dimensions. The first fine-tuning is actually the details. I mentioned the standards. So now we are in an intense process, and ESMA has just published the second batch of the proposals for the technical standards. I can encourage all of you to read that and comment on that very seriously. What I note from my perspective, of course, from blockchain and a broader perspective, is that a lot of what is in there is actually not only related to MiCAR, is not only related to the financial domain, but for example, on the environmental aspects, etc., that will set a precedent for a much bigger discussion in the token and crypto space, which should be very seriously. And I'm personally very concerned about what is in, so that merits a very profound discussion. But there's also, of course, a political discussion, because many big players are telling us, yeah, nice to have MiCAR, but we hope we don't really need it, because after the US election situation with the SEC and in the US might get better again, or in other parts of the world. I have my doubts on that. We will see that. But I would say it's a very exciting, it's a very intense period. And on the one hand side, it merits to look into all the details and have the industry feedback, because we need to listen to that and take it seriously. On the other hand side, we must realize that this is a marathon where MiCAR is only the first perhaps 2 kilometers, but not the other 40 kilometers that we have been supposed to run.
And that's even with some 400 and something pages of MiCAR. There's more paper to come. Let's try to dig into it, and let's try to identify who needs to do what in order to be compliant with what the MiCAR requirements are. Let's start with these animals out there that already have issued tokens that are listed, that are tradable in Germany. And I think, Johannes, you wanted to take this to just explain a little bit. If a client comes to you and tells you, okay, we did an ICO or whatever, and our tokens are out there and we are in the EU, what needs to be done from their side?
Yeah. I think the first question is, what type of token has been issued? Is it an asset reference token? Is it an e-money token? If it's an e-money token, you have already probably issues under current legislation if you are not an e-money institution or credit institution. But if you have just issued another form of crypto asset than the two mentioned, then the question is, what are your future plans for this token? Will you issue it and offer it on a continuous basis also during the next years? If so, then MiCAR will apply on your public offering after the end of the next year. If you stop offering it, then MiCAR will not apply directly. However, if you are admitted to trading on a trading facility, then we have, again, implications for MiCAR, meaning that on marketing materials there, we will see the impact on MiCAR also starting end of next year, that you need to comply with certain marketing regulations of MiCAR. At the same time, if you continue being traded, your token on an exchange, then the operator of the exchange will be obliged to request a white paper. This is not applicable end of next year, but it's more or less from the beginning of 2028. So there's a lot of time to prepare for that, also for the exchange providers to see that the tokens traded there are being compliant. But as said, it's time to start your homework now, so you need to know what you will do next year to be compliant by end of next year.
I think that's pretty relevant, that even a token that used to be a utility token, however, is traded on any venue, will be required by the trading venue to continue being traded to provide a white paper for the trading venue. So there are some interoperabilities.
Yeah. So the obligation is actually with the operator, not with the issuer. However, the operator will stop trading you or allowing to trade your token if you don't support him with the white paper. So it's an obligation on you from an economical perspective.
Okay. The next addressee of MiCAR is the crypto asset service providers, and we already have a bunch of existing, even licensed service providers in Germany, many of them holding a custody license and other licenses. And Nick, what's your kind of recommendation for those that are already in the space, maybe already hold a German license?
yeah, I guess some wish they would hold a crypto custody license under German law, or at least are still waiting for it to be issued. So either in the waiting position under the provisionary license, or in the application process. So maybe on that front, it will be interesting to see how that plays in with MiCAR. We already have a feeling that the BaFin is still holding back with the issuance of crypto custody licenses simply on the basis that now MiCAR is already foreshadowing what other regulatory requirements need to be fulfilled. Yeah, they're also eyeing on the RTS, looking back into the technical requirements that they have put onto the custody providers. So we already see that MiCAR is foreshadowing a slightly higher requirements on crypto custody providers. We're still waiting for the gap analysis, in the sense that, how much more do you need to do as a German licensed crypto custodian when you would then like to make an application under MiCAR. Yeah, unfortunately, crypto custody is not simply a license that you can transform like other MiFID licenses into a MiCAR license by notification, but you need to make a new application under MiCAR, hoping that the new application will go rather smoothly on the basis that you have already been admitted as a crypto custodian under German law. If you look at more traditional custodians, and I think there is the intention that traditional custody providers will also adopt a custody service in connection with cryptocurrencies and stablecoins. From a, let's say, operational point of view, there is a bit of comfort because a lot of provisions in MiCAR mirror what a typical custodian would need to do. That is conflict of interest, continuity, that type of segregation of customer assets. But still, you need to implement that in a new technical framework, and that is something that takes a bit of time. Unfortunately, with the help of the Zukunftsfinanzierungsgesetz, we will also hopefully be in a position under German law to reflect the MiCAR requirements, for example, with regard to insolvency remoteness of the assets held in a crypto omnibus account. So what I would recommend to do is, follow closely the RTS if you're a crypto custodian, in order to see what the standards will be that you need to comply with when you make an application under MiCAR for a crypto custody license.
Maybe brief additional questions. Sandra mentioned that even portfolio management portfolio management services for crypto assets or related to crypto assets will need a license. Is that something where you would think of existing providers that need to upgrade or to apply for a license?
Yeah, I mean, that relates more to the question, what type of assets are you actually managing? Yeah, so in case you are looking into also managing crypto assets, then certainly the question is on the table whether you need to apply for additional licenses.
All right. With that, I would like to hop over to trading venues. There are already a bunch of venues existing in Germany where you can trade crypto. Miroslav, what needs to be done on their side? What do they have to implement?
Yeah, well, if we look at the operators of trading venues, we can all agree, I believe, that they're going to be the most heavily regulated category of crypto asset service providers under MiCAR. And where we see particular challenges that clients are facing in the implementation process who are applying for this kind of license is really in three areas. So first is trade transparency, so pre and post trade transparency, because the draft RTS that were published earlier this month, they basically create the requirements based on the MiFIR framework. So there are some smaller differences, but the basis is pretty much the same. And for those of us who remember, MiFID II implementation was everything but an easy task to accomplish, especially because there is a huge technical and operational effort that needs to be put in the process. And this is something that takes time, takes also significant amounts of money and human resources. The second area is pretty much everything around the compliance with the market abuse requirements, because especially when it comes to detection and reporting of market abuse incidents. You really need to create tools for market surveillance. You need to create screening mechanisms and risk methodologies that you're going to be using. And this is something that really takes time. Also, testing of these tools takes time. And for those institutions that are not looking to develop their own, they also need to find an external vendor. And for this, you need to put outsourcing framework in place, negotiate the terms, and so on, which brings me to my final point. And this is something that really affects all crypto asset service providers. And this is the compliance with the digital operational resilience requirements and the business continuity. This is something that is regulated under a separate piece of the EU legislation, namely new Digital Operational Resilience Act, DORA. That is pretty much a novelty for the entire financial services industry, especially in those EU member states where we didn't have comprehensive regulations on IT requirements, like in Germany, so for instance in Ireland or Spain. And we see that clients are really having a lot of challenges really wrapping their head around these new requirements and finding proper ways to create processes and procedures that are going to satisfy national competent authorities. For instance, in Germany, even for a crypto custodial license, it is really our experience. BaFin is really focusing on the compliance with IT requirements because these businesses are completely IT driven. And this is really something that it's going to be a big challenge to bridge over the coming period until MiCA becomes operational.
All right. Let's move to this crucial part where MiCAR has around 100 pages about stablecoins. They are called the asset referenced token. And Patrick, Circle is the issuer of stablecoins that are known, however, is not yet regulated in the European Union. What's your view on that, and what do you think does an issuer of a reliable stablecoin need to do to be compliant with MiCAR?
Yeah, so I mean, as you mentioned, I think stablecoins, so if you take those two categories together, asset reference tokens and e-money tokens, make up a large part of MiCAR, right? And it was, from the beginning, it was the most politicized aspect of MiCAR, with the large political opposition that existed in the European Union against Facebook's Libra project in the early days of MiCAR. And so I think it's safe to say that even from an end result point of view and from an operational point of view, the stablecoin part of MiCAR is a very challenging one. Let me share a few ideas and thoughts about the asset reference token part before I move on to e-money tokens. And just to make that clear, Circle is not involved in issuing asset reference tokens. But generally speaking, I think the category of asset reference tokens, one legal challenge and also operational challenge is actually how to structure those instruments in order to make sure that they are distinct from existing fund structures or, for example, MiFID certificates. That's something that also regulators are asking a lot of questions on. And then there's a ton of operational challenges with respect to the balancing of the reserves with redemption requirements that still need to be specified, liquidity requirements in upcoming technical standards that are even more, I would say, complex for asset reference tokens because they have way more assets in the reserve compared to e-money tokens. And the category of asset reference token in general is entirely new, right? There is no precedent for it compared to e-money tokens where you have the traditional concept of e-money. Looking at e-money tokens, I would say similar as for asset reference token, one big challenge that we face, and I think that all issuers, but also crypto asset service providers that want to engage with e-money tokens face are the timelines. Because different from crypto asset service providers, actually Title 3 and Title 4 of MiCAR, which cover ARTs and EMTs, already enter into application end of June next year. And there are no transitional periods foreseen for these two MiCAR chapters, which makes it very, very complex and challenging because, as mentioned earlier, you have on one side the EBA that still has to come up with a ton of technical standards on actually how to comply on a technical level with MiCAR. And some of them will only be finally adopted probably in Q2 next year. And then at the same time, you have to be compliant with everything that MiCAR actually recommends by Q2 next year. So timelines is one very obvious point. And then, I mean, I could go on for a long time, but I would highlight two general challenges for e-money tokens. One is that an e-money token as a single category in MiCAR is both a crypto asset and also e-money. And that makes it very different from all the other token categories under MiCAR that are only crypto assets. And so e-money tokens actually have parts of the e-money directive that apply, parts of new MiCAR requirements that apply. And that makes it very challenging for example, also crypto asset service providers that want to deal with e-money tokens, because they might need to take the payment service directive into consideration, for example, that covers e-money as funds as well, right? And so just by the nature of the asset being both e-money and crypto asset, there's a lot of operational complexity. And then the second...
So, maybe just, I think we all agree that it will be pretty complex. However, the European Commission obviously felt that there is a market, that there is a demand for a European, reliable, compliant stablecoin issuance. Do you expect that there will be applicants for that, and who is more likely? Is it a PayPal, is it Circle, or will it be Commerzbank or a new kid on the block to apply for its new stablecoin? Maybe quick question from your side, and then I come back to the panel here in Frankfurt.
I would distinguish between ARTs and EMTs. Yep. For ARTs, I'm not personally foreseeing a ton of industry interest at this point. I've spoken to single projects and startups that are interested into it, but I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see massive issuers of asset reference tokens in the foreseeable future. For e-money tokens, I would say there's definitely a ton of interest out there. There are existing e-money institutions that are looking into it. There are new players like us that are coming into market and applying for the necessary licenses and want to issue e-money tokens. And I also think we have heard from several financial institutions in the European Union that they are looking at this category already. We have been hearing from larger banks or even asset managers like DWS that they are looking into it. So I believe there will be plenty of e-money tokens out there, but it will take quite a while to get everything right.
Quick question to you here. So, whom would you expect from left to right? And Joachim, you're out because you're commission. Whom would you expect, and when would you expect to have the first licensees for either e-money token or stablecoin issuer in Europe?
So, taking a look at the traditional scheme implemented in MiCAR, we have already rules in place for those who have issued and are currently issuing stablecoins. Therefore, there's a good chance just to adapt on this transitional scheme. On the other hand, as you said, we will see the say traditional players like PayPal. Funny thing saying it's a traditional player, but they will be of course the first, and I think some of them already announced that they will issue under MiCAR because it just provides a good framework and such a huge market reach.
Your view?
I think I agree with Patrick. Yeah, there will not be a lot of asset reference token. They're just, in my view, too close to money market funds. I would be hoping that there are a couple of larger institutions issuing an e-money token simply because we need some kind of payment mechanism for, let's say, the digital asset platforms and trading venues that are coming up. They're all, missing the cash leg. So. Fingers crossed that there may be a bigger institution moving forward to provide a market-recognized stablecoin until the ECB comes around with its CBDC. European. Okay. I would call it wholesale CBDC.
Miroslav,
I think I'm going to be quick. So when it comes to timeline, I think looking at the timeline, especially for the delegated acts, probably we're not going to see the first players having licenses right when MiCAR becomes operational. And when it comes to individual names, I wouldn't like to pull out any individual names here because there are some players working quietly on their preparations for the new framework. So let's see how this is going to unravel.
All right. We briefly touched on the areas where we have to define the borderline between applicability of MiCAR and MiFID and other rules. And in particular, if one were to issue something which is referencing a real-world asset, and in certain areas one can imagine that you can really choose if you want to have a security that falls under MiFID, or to have it in a tokenized format to fall under MiCAR with all these uncertainties. Nick, what would be your recommendation to a client walking in your door?
Probably in an ideal world, you have both licenses, but based on experience, and that may be surprising, it's not easy to fall within MiCAR, because in particular, the financial instruments and the category of derivatives and securities is rather broad. And I think MiCAR, the application is more limited than we would expect. It's, if you break it down, mainly stable coins, and we will see how many there will be, and that includes e-money tokens and cryptocurrencies, but let's see how many cryptocurrencies will actually be moving towards a regulated platform in Europe.
All right. Another area where we have to distinguish, or we have to define the applicability, is the NFTs. Johannes, what's your view on that? How to avoid applicability, or should you, if you issue an NFT, always try to be compliant?
Yeah, we heard it already in the wonderful keynote. You have to be careful with NFTs, because the question is, what is an NFT? And if you go out to the market, you will hear a different answer than asking a lawyer or a regulator. So we don't need to mix the technical NFTs, which are, for example, issued on ERC 721 protocol, and the legal perspective on it. Because if you are issuing NFTs, technical NFTs, and issuing 100, which are all the same content, then from a regulatory perspective, the risk is the same, and therefore the regulation is the same. Therefore, this is not a unique asset anymore, and therefore it will fall under MiCAR. On the other hand, if you are actually tokenizing unique things, like tokenizing a watch with one token, then it is again unique and will not fall under MiCAR. So from this perspective, the question is, what is the purpose of your business? And then you're either in or out of MiCAR.
I think that will be something where particularly the European Commission and maybe the BaFin even needs to give a little bit more guidance to get a clearer view. One final pretty relevant aspect is the international aspect. Miroslav, what's your view on non-EU players that might want to have the services provided in the EU? How should they prepare for MiCAR?
Yeah, this was really a big topic in the last 3 years, especially for our clients based in the UK or foreign clients who are operating from the UK. And there was a big hope that there's going to be some kind of like a backdoor for the entrance to the EU market. But now when we see the final text of MiCAR, we can realize that this reverse solicitation principle, which basically refers to the provision of service on the exclusive initiative of the client, is really designed very, very narrowly. So the players that are looking to have open option for EU clients but are not looking to have a solid footprint in the union are going to be able to accept EU clients, but on the other hand, they're not going to be able to solicit in any way whatsoever EU-based residents, and they're not going to be able even to have follow-up calls or consultations and offer their products or services in addition. And therefore, we don't see much interest for reverse solicitation at the moment, and clients that are operating on the both sides of the channel, so in the UK and in the EU, are now almost all having the same strategy, which is basically to establish two subsidiaries, one in the UK, one in the EU, which alongside one another comply with separate frameworks, since in the UK we also have new rules that are kicking in as of beginning of this month.
Good point, definitely. We are getting to the end of our time slot. Nonetheless, we want one step down. because alcoholic beverages are already served outside. You're all working with BaFin, and I would just ask you on a scale from 1 to 9, what's your experience with regard to the supportiveness and awareness ability of BaFin, starting with you, Miroslav, 1 to 9, how good?
Well, I would, in comparison to other regulators around the EU with which we had experience, BaFin is in the topic, so they understand how this works, and this is especially due to the fact that the activity was regulated for quite some time now. Of course, everything can get faster.
It was a single sentence answer. I mean, it's difficult with lawyers, but it's 1 to 9 is just sufficient.
It's sufficient.
Okay. What's your view?
What's 1 and what's 9? What's the best?
9 is the best, yeah.
9 is the best? Okay, so willingness 9, speed 2.
Okay, a valid point, yeah. Johannes?
Yeah, I would arrange to 5, so in the middle.
Okay. Patrick, you have a view on the German regulator?
I mean, we are not applying for licenses in Germany, but from my experience back at Bitkom, BaFin did always a very good job, very comprehensive knowledge. So I would say 7.
All right. With that, I would like to skip my closing remarks. However, I would ask Joachim to just give a brief outlook on what to expect in the future from the EU related to crypto assets and digital securities.
I think that was an excellent discussion, actually one of the best I've been participating in, and that's a lot. I take 2 points out of that and then very briefly to the future. Number one, I think we have a very clear hierarchy indeed what the interest is, and it was discussed given the state of discussions on CBDCs, but also the digital euro, given the demand of industry in programmable money. I think there is a very clear demand for e-money in various forms, and that's where we have the discussions. I personally think that in the medium and long term, given the state of the world and the geopolitical developments, we will have a huge uptake of asset reference tokens in whatever form, which is very good to start the discussion, but it will take a while. It will not be that fast, but I can tell you there's a lot of discussions on that going on. That's point number one. Point number two is, I think, what we saw very clearly in the panel on various lines and also in the discussions at the conference before. We have a lot of trees. We have a lot of nice trees. We don't have a forest. I think you have that now with MiCAR, and DORA was mentioned, but also the e-money directive was mentioned. I could mention also other things, transfer of funds, whatever is out there. These are individual pieces of work, good pieces of work, but where's the coherence in these things? And that is a point that I would like to bring to the attention of everyone, because this is not only about what is written in a regulation or what is in the standards, but this is about investing in the education and the skills of people to put all of that together. Indeed, we've learned from the presentation before that you cannot only look at one CASP, but you need to see the whole pipeline of CASPs. You can also not only look into MiCAR, but also see the other related fields, whether you have a choice or not. When you see a standard, you cannot take a standard passively. I hear several times, and that's a matter of concern, that we have to live with the standards. You can also influence the standards. And I really call you to do that, because if, for example, I look at one tiny example among hundreds of examples, that the idea is for a white paper in order to see the ecological footprint, that you not only have to give certain information, but also it is proposed to have the energy mix of a country named in your white paper in some form. I wonder where that ends. I mean, this is, it's my personal opinion, absurd, but this is, of course, open for discussion. So there's a lot of elements, I would say, where we need coherence in this discussion. What we can expect next is, I think, in the next, indeed, year, to address all of these issues. There will be no final clearance. I hear a lot of discussions very often, especially about cocktails. What about MiCAR 2.0? I can assure you that at least from discussions that I'm having, no one is thinking of MiCAR 2.0, because what would that be? We have a MiCAR that we need to get into life. We would have to work on the context of all of the things, the very practical things we have discussed. And the only thing that, of course, is in the discussion in the future, MiCAR 2.0, might be then on DeFi or things that have not been regulated. In my personal opinion, you cannot have DeFi regulation under financial regulation. Either it would not be DeFi or it would not be a regulation. But a DeFi regulation is a contradiction in terms, and that is something that I personally don't see. But next year we will have the lottery, we will have a new work program at the end of the year for 5 years. What do we know what the politicians will decide? I think we have enough homework to do. I think the key aspect is two things: cooperation, having a lot of educational activities, but also assertiveness. You are not on the passive side. You are the ones that also can drive that process works with asking the right questions, with putting the right evidence out of the things, with showing very clearly the use cases, what works and what doesn't work. And what I can tell you, what politicians love most is things that actually work, that create jobs, that have an economic impact, not only for the key investor, but also for society as a whole. If you can demonstrate that, I am very, very sure that there are ways around any technical problem, because at the end of the day, much more than you think is a question of interpretation and of agreement in a political process, and that you shouldn't underestimate. So don't accept what is just written in a line, but give that a meaning and discuss it.
Thank you, Joachim. And I like the idea of the European Commission creating such a complex framework to create jobs for lawyers that need to start working with a white piece of paper, because that's different from the
I can tell you it's not only lawyers. I'm an economic historian, and the one advice, and I've given that recently actually in a legal journal that asked me for that, is the thing that you can invest in and it brings you benefits is look into history of how people have resolved problems that are very similar to our problems. The key problem is that many people that I talk to think that they are reinventing the wheel and they are the first to see a problem or have an idea. Just go into the libraries, talk to people, read the stuff. There are many answers out there. And perhaps if the lawyers don't want to do that themselves, you probably have a few trainees or so. Get them into the library, but the resources are there.
Wonderful. Thank you. I have to thank you and my panel for the insight you gave to me, and sorry for being a little bit late, but we are the latest panel today, and with that, thank you very much.